Chad Henne will forever haunt us all, and the Browns defense will also haunt us all for a while this offseason. Just many missed opportunities that plagued the team down the stretch, and the numbers weren't that bad, middle in the pack in terms of yards per game allowed, but hiding behind those numbers is a schedule of really bad offenses, as well as 3 games played in monsoons where the offense couldn't move the ball. So I went back and watched the tape for this Browns defense, and 3 things really jumped out at me on why this Browns defense was just really not great. So the first being a general lack of athleticism throughout the defense, really. The second is miscommunication issues that are just plaguing that young secondary in their really first year working together as a group. And then that third reason, the biggest reason I personally think, is the decline of Myles Garrett post-COVID. It was a very disappointing way to end that season on that fateful last drive by Chad Henne, but it's important to reflect and see how the Browns can improve this offseason and learn from the mistakes and issues that they had this season. So, let's analyze some film. So, just to rip the Band-Aid off here, let's go to that 3rd and 4 conversion that the Chiefs made, late fourth quarter. The Browns need to stop, get it back to their offense for the game-winning drive. And here the Browns are going to run a cover 1 hole. It's going to be a cover 1, a free safety, going to defend that middle third, and then Karl Joseph is going to be that hole defender. He's not a robber, but he's a hole defender. It's practically the same zone, and it's man across the board. It's pretty easy to decipher this. They kind of rotate down from a cover 2 man to a cover 1, but that's besides the point. Here, the Chad Henne is going to target his running back out of the backfield, who's going to run a swing route to the left side. And here, B.J. Goodson is just plain and simple too slow and doesn't get there. This is a very makeable stop. He's got perfect leverage. He's in a prime position to go run down there and make a tackle, but he doesn't because Darrell Williams is just too fast, and B.J. Goodson, and Darrell Williams isn't even that fast. Just B.J. Goodson is slow to react, slow to get his feet planted, and doesn't drive on the ball carrier in time, and that's what's happened. This linebacker group is just painfully slow. And the same thing holds true for the secondary. Going back to that Chiefs game, here the Browns are going to run a cover 1. Man, you can tell it's man because they motion out the running back and split him out wide, and a linebacker follows him, so obviously that's an indicator for man coverage. And what happens here is if you look towards the slot, Tyreek Hill is matched up with Kevin Johnson. Obviously not a favorable matchup. But looking at this, Tyreek Hill is going to run essentially a crosser. It's a seam/crosser, and he's just going to run over the middle of the field. But watch how slow Kevin Johnson's reaction is to this shift in his route. Tyreek Hill does not try anything extravagant with his release. He just blows by Kevin Johnson. And I know Kevin Johnson is not the fastest, but the slow reaction to this route, it has to be at least half a second. It is ridiculously slow, and of course he doesn't have the makeup speed to go catch up to Tyreek Hill. And of course Tyreek Hill goes for a big gain. They are extremely slow in the secondary, and it is really hard for the Browns to cover speedy receivers and leave their corners on an island with those speedy receivers. And before we move on to the next issue that happened this season, I do want to look at this. Here it's 4th and 10 in the Steelers game, Week 17. The Browns can essentially end this game with a stop here on 4th and 10. And the Browns are actually going to continuously, again, run this cover 1. Joe Woods likes to put his corners on an island. Except here, Mason Rudolph floats a beautiful ball to the back of the end zone, and Claypool absolutely just mosses and out-physicals the corner here. This is the issue with this Browns defense. We're not going to analyze this because the Browns need some physicality and speed athletes in that secondary. Right now, it's made up of practice squad guys and a couple stars that are just they're fast. Like Denzel Ward, he's fast, but he's not big. The Browns need to pick up, whether that's free agency or the draft, they need to find someone that has physicality and some speed so the Browns can cover Chase Claypool and can compete with the Kansas City receivers that they will need to if they want to get to the Super Bowl, because right now, that's the next stop. So now shifting focus to the issues and the miscommunications in the young secondary under their first year with Joe Woods. Here it's a 3rd and 6, midfield, Giants have the ball, and the Browns are going to run a cover 3, except instead of just the standard cover 3, it has match principles. And so it's a cover 3 match. And what a cover 3 match is it's applying to the rules that the defensive backs have to abide by. So if you look on the opposite, on both sides of the formation, the defensive backs are aligned symmetrically. They look very similar in terms of how they are aligned to the receivers. And this is for a reason. So the guys the most inwards, that are the most inward in the slot, so that would be Kevin Johnson and Carl Joseph, their read is to see which receiver breaks inward. So they will take on the responsibility of whichever receiver breaks inward first. And so in this case, if you look at the top of the screen, Carl Joseph, he reads that the outside receiver breaks inward. He reads it a little late, but he's still able to push that receiver out to the middle of the field. And that's what he needs to do. He needs to get him off his flat zone, where he is, his flat zone. That is exactly also what, on the opposite side of the field, Kevin Johnson, he does the same thing. He watches, he sees the outside receiver breaks inward first, so he watches him. If you might think, well, he's not actually looking at that receiver, but he is, because if he does not need to watch his inside, because he has those linebackers that are playing their hook curl assignments, so they will take care of if he decides to break towards the middle of the field. So all he has to do is make sure that receiver doesn't break outside toward the boundary. Now, where the mistake comes in is the safety. He is supposed to carry the receiver that breaks outside and guard the vertical boundary, but he gets drawn in for some reason to the inside receiver that breaks inward. He misreads that coverage, and the Giants get a big gain out of that play. And the main reason that I think this Browns defense really struggled, especially at the end of the year, was because of Myles Garrett suffering COVID. So pre-Myles Garrett COVID, weeks 1 through 10, the team generated 22 sacks, 9.5 of which was Myles Garrett. 14 turnovers were generated. The Browns defense ranked 9th in percentage of explosive pass plays allowed at 7%. So this means that of all pass plays ran by the opposing offense through this time period, only 7% of them were considered explosive, again, 9th%. Use that same idea with run plays. The Browns were 5th in percentage of explosive run plays allowed at 9%. And then post-COVID, Myles Garrett, when Myles Garrett came off the COVID after he was cleared to play after suffering a COVID, the team generated 16 sacks, 3.5 of which were Myles, only 7 turnovers forced, and they ranked a measly 22nd in percentage of explosive pass plays allowed and 17th in explosive run plays allowed. So there was a clear drop-off statistically for this Browns defense, but you can also see on tape just how much Myles Garrett was really struggling. The reason the Browns defense was really pretty good through weeks 1 through 10, and it's not because they had an elite secondary, it's because Myles Garrett was able to mask the issues that were really always there for the secondary. Here the Browns are running a cover 4, really standard cover 4, pretty much as vanilla as you can get. And if you look on closest to your screen, you've got Terrence Mitchell down there at the bottom. He's trailing, and he gets absolutely roasted there by that receiver that runs a comeback. He just loses sight of him and isn't able to flip his hips enough to essentially get there. And because he's just bailed out by Myles Garrett, who gets there in a flash because of that elite bend ability to bend around the tackle and really get there before the receiver's able to even come out of his breaks and the quarterback to even go through his reads. So that's just one example of how Myles Garrett was able to really bail out this secondary time and time again. Garrett didn't just create sacks, he also created turnovers indirectly. Here, for example, it's a 3rd and 6. Colts really needed to convert this if they had any shot of winning this game, and Myles Garrett just collapses the pocket with his pure power and forces Rivers to throw a pick. Here he's going to try a simple power move. He's going to look like he's going to go just bend around the tackles like he always does with his insane ability to just bend around guys. It's ridiculous. But then he kind of switches to his power and just straight arms the left tackle straight back to the quarterback. Rivers disrupts his flow in the pocket. He has to step up, and he throws a pick into triple coverage, essentially. And again, it doesn't have to be sacks. Myles Garrett, what he did was wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks, forcing them to make bad decisions, even if it didn't show up for him on the stat line with his sacks. And now we go to week 15, and it's a different story. Myles Garrett still is the same player. It's just COVID affects people differently, and in this case, it affected Myles' respiratory system. It was very apparent that he was struggling to breathe on sidelines during in-between plays. He even said it himself in a press conference. And here, for example, you can see it very clearly. It's this. Now, I'll say lack of effort, but this is not on Myles. This is just because it's a low effort because of what he's gone through. Here he's working on Andrew Thomas, and he tries to spin pretty much speed rush Andrew Thomas, but he gets shoved, and it's just, you can see that he's not the same. His get off is not as fast. His speed and bend ability is just not there yet. And Colt McCoy exposes this really bad Browns secondary, throws an easy pass to Evan Ingram. That's what happened when you didn't have an elite pass rush because of Myles and his COVID issues, and you just have a bad secondary, and teams are going to pick you apart. There were obviously more reasons why this Browns defense just wasn't great at all this year. But of course, these are the three main reasons that I really believe were the reasons why they just struggled as a unit. But the good news, if you want to be optimistic about something, is that last offseason was focused on getting this offense in the right direction. You got Austin Hooper signed, Jack Conklin signed, you drafted Jedrick Wills 10th overall. That offseason was dedicated towards the offense. And I think this offseason, we're going to see a shift in focus to focus on upgrading that defense. As you've seen, this defense has been infuriating to watch. The Browns historically have not had good defenses, and recently the Browns have not had a great defensive coordinator. I do think Joe Woods needs to be retained for another season. He had practice squad corners out there for very significant snaps, and I just think it would be unfair and very Cleveland-like to just fire him immediately. We need to give him another shot and see what he can do with some NFL caliber roster and personnel. But yes, 3rd and 14 and 4th and inches are going to hurt, and hurt a lot for the rest of this offseason, thinking about what could have been. But the Browns have a really bright future, and I'm really excited to see what they can change offensively and defensively for the 2021 season and beyond. Thanks for watching.